Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen. So today, like I said in the teacher message video, what I want to look at and what I want to talk about is the Texas Revolution. Before we get into, sorry, just going to adjust that. Before we get into the Texas Revolution, there is an idea that we have to know and have to understand because that is going to really take and explain this drive of the United States to move westward. There is a reason that many people took to the Oregon Trail. There is a reason that you are going to have a Texas Revolution, and then eventually, more importantly, you are going to have a Mexican-American War that we're going to talk about next class. And that idea that I want to that really kind of brings this all together is the idea of manifest destiny, or the belief that God had ordered the United States to settle land all the way to the Pacific Ocean to spread American ideals. That is the definition for it. That's what the term manifest destiny means. Really, the United States believed that it was its right, and God had given them that right to own land from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. And that belief is going to drive the United States to take territory and take control of land all the way from the Atlantic to the Pacific, whether Native Americans own it or Mexico owns it, whatever the case may be. The United States believes that it is their right to own land all across the continent, basically. So that idea of manifest destiny is really going to drive the United States westward. And that drive westward is going to inflame the argument and really inflame the argument over slavery and that disagreement over slavery, and really kind of make it grow louder and make that whole issue a more pressing, more important issue, which is ultimately going to lead us to the Civil War. So this idea of manifest destiny is really going to make the issue of slavery a much more important issue, and ultimately it's going to lead to the Civil War. But this is a very important idea, this idea of manifest destiny. So to understand how the United States takes Texas, Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, Colorado, California, Nevada, all of those states, we have to understand this idea of manifest destiny. So I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that, make sure that I made it kind of clear and went over that idea of manifest destiny, because you will see it throughout this unit, and you will see it later when you get to 8th grade and you get to imperialism. But I just wanted to make sure I went over that. So what I want to talk about is where I want to start with this idea of the Texas Revolution and with this event of the Texas Revolution is I want to take us back a little bit to the year 1821 when Mexico was fighting for its independence from Spain. And we already addressed this. We already talked a little bit about it. Around this time, you have the era of good feelings. You have Monroe, who is president of the United States, and he sees that Mexico has gained its independence from Spain, and many in the United States see a similarity between the fight for independence of Mexico and the fight for independence of the United States. And with that similarity, Monroe realizes that he needs to really kind of say something and really kind of help to secure Latin America, but also secure the interests of the United States. So that is when he issues the Monroe Doctrine to basically tell Europe to keep out of the Western Hemisphere. The United States will now worry about it and now control it. So right around this time, this 1821, Mexico is able to declare its independence, and then it creates and sets up a republic in 1824, where people run for government positions to represent all of the people of Mexico, much like our government, exactly like our government, the government we have today. So a republic is established in Mexico in 1824. Now, Mexico owns a lot of land. They are They are located obviously in Central America, like they are today, but they also own the modern day U.S. states of Texas, Arizona, California, Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah. They own parts or all of the land that makes up those states today. So the United States, the United States does not own them. Many of let me rephrase that. Mexico, the government of Mexico, realizes that they don't have enough people to fill all of the land area that they control and they own. And they're worried that either some European power or the United States might come in and take control of it and try to take it away from Mexico. So, what they want to do is they want to go ahead and invite people to move in and to settle that land. And what the one thing that they expect is that whoever they invite to move into that area, those people will follow the laws of Mexico. That's the only requirement. If they invite people, those people that they invite, that is the only rule that they expect them. That is the only condition for moving into Mexico, is you must follow our laws. So what they do is they invite a lot of people from the southern United States to move in and move to Mexico and move to Texas and those other states to live and to settle so that Mexico does not lose that land. They believe that if they invite these people to move into Texas, they will follow the laws that Mexico has set. They will become Mexican citizens eventually, and they will be able to settle that land and they won't have to worry about losing it. What they don't count on is the people they invite to live in Mexico. They don't realize that even though they agree to follow the laws of Mexico, that they are actually going to ignore them. One of the laws that Mexico has is that they have banned slavery. And as we know, if you invite Southern Americans, you are inviting that institution of slavery because that was their livelihood. That's how they made their money. They made their money by growing crops and buying slaves to do the work for them and to help them do the work, if you were a yeoman farmer. So many of these Americans coming from the southern United States are moving in and they're bringing their slaves, and they're already violating that law that Mexico has established. Early on, Mexico really kind of looks the other way. It just says, okay, we need people to live here, so we'll allow you to do this. We'll allow this to happen. And as long as you do not violate anything else, as long as you follow the rest of our laws, we will be okay with this. However, as more and more people begin to arrive in Texas, the Mexican government realizes that they cannot look the other way. Because if they allow the people of Texas to ignore this law, what does that say to the rest of their people that live in Texas and live near the capital? So in 1830, they realized they cannot ignore this law anymore, and they cannot allow more Americans to move into Mexico to kind of set up what they see as kind of a colony there. So they decide, okay, excuse me, sorry guys. So the Mexican government decides, okay, that's enough. We are not allowing any more Americans to move into this settlement. Whoever is here at this time, that is all that can be there. No more Americans are allowed to move in. And that is 1830. In 1834, a man by the name of Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna takes power. Santa Anna, over the next 2 years, becomes a dictator of Mexico. He abolishes the Constitution. He gets rid of the Constitution. He gets rid of the Republic, and he sets himself up as a dictator. As soon as this happens, the people of Mexico, or actually, let me rephrase that, not the people of Mexico, the people of Texas, the Americans who had grown up and lived in a republic their whole lives, see Santa Anna take over and establish himself as a dictator and realize, no, we can't allow this to happen. We are not okay with this. We already have a problem that Mexico does not want our slaves, does not like us, treats us a little differently. And we already don't like the fact that we have to follow Mexico's laws and they won't let anybody else move in. we cannot have a dictator also. So what Texas decides to do is they rebel and they try to declare their independence. Before they declare their independence, they take over the towns of Goliad and San Antonio in 1836, and they start the Texas Revolution that way. And eventually, on March 2nd, 1836, they are able to declare their independence from Mexico, and they become known as the Lone Star Republic. Now, Santa Anna sees this. He sees the taking of Goliad. He sees the taking of San Antonio. And he realizes that he can't let this stand and he can't allow the Texans to challenge his power. So he sends his army from Mexico City north to Texas and to San Antonio. San Antonio is going to be the first town that he arrives at once he gets into Texas. Now, in San Antonio is a mission. It is a church and also a living quarters for monks and stuff like that. It is a very old place that was built by monks and priests and other Christians that had moved to Texas and moved to that area to live and to settle before they had moved back to Mexico. And in this town, this mission is known as the Alamo. This is the place. As soon as many of the citizens that live in San Antonio hear that Santa Anna is bringing an army and marching his way up to Texas to put down the revolution, many of the people in San Antonio and the people that live near San Antonio move into this mission and begin to try to defend San Antonio from this mission known as the Alamo. It is the best defensible place near San Antonio, and it is the only place that the Texans have and stand a chance to defend San Antonio and to defend Texas. Now, many of the leaders in the Alamo send word out to the rest of Texas, begging them to come to their aid and begging them to come fight at the Alamo and to kind of prevent Santa Anna from trying to take over and trying to defeat the Texas Revolution. But the leaders of the Texas Army, a guy by the name of Houston, is worried that his army will not be able to take and defend Texas if he goes and faces Santa Anna at San Antonio. So unfortunately, many of the 200 men that are in the Alamo are really left to kind of defend themselves. And from February 23rd to March 6th, the Alamo is left in kind of to, like I said, to defend itself. Santa Anna's army arrives in San Antonio right around February 23rd, and there is kind of a standoff between Santa Anna's army, the Mexican army, and the Texans in the Alamo. There are some skirmishes, some attempts at firing at the walls of the Alamo and stuff like that to really try to take and weaken the defenses and weaken the morale of the Texans in the Alamo. But eventually on March 6th, 1836, Santa Anna sends his full army in to the Alamo to attack and defeat the Texans, the 200 Texans that are in the Alamo trying to defend San Antonio. Santa Anna takes a lot of losses, but ultimately the Alamo is taken over by the Mexican army, and all of the Texans that are in the Alamo are killed. All of the men fighting to defend the Alamo and to defend San Antonio are killed by the Mexican army and by Santa Anna. So Houston, in the meantime, is really kind of trying to find the perfect area that he can take and fight Santa Anna, where he has a chance at defeating Santa Anna's army. So he continually retreats and forces Santa Anna to move farther and farther into Texas, kind of lengthening his supply lines and making it much more difficult for him to bring supplies and continue to bring the weapons that he needs to fight an effective war, until ultimately Houston finds an opening and finds a field and fights in the battle known as the Battle of San Jacinto. Now, many of the Texans use the defeat of the men in the Alamo as a battle cry. And remember, the Alamo really rings out because people are very upset that many of the people they knew in San Antonio were killed by Santa and his men, and were not taken prisoner, were not allowed to leave or, try to retreat, or were not taken prisoner. They were all killed. So this is something that really angers the other Texans that are fighting under Sam Houston, and they use it as a rallying cry. And as they charge towards the Mexican army at the Battle of San Jacinto, they can be heard screaming, "Remember the Alamo." Sam Houston is able to defeat the Mexican army and Santa Anna's men in about 20 minutes, and Santa Anna is ultimately captured, and he is forced to sign over Texas and to give Texas its independence in exchange for his life. Ultimately, he agrees to that, and in 1836, the Texans are granted their independence, and they win their independence after the Battle of San Jacinto. So where does that leave Texas in relation to the United States, and how does Texas eventually become part of the United States? Well, as soon as Texas declares its independence, on March 2nd, 1836, they immediately request annexation by the United States. They want the United States to take Texas and make it part of the United States. That's what annexation means. So they want the United States to make Texas another state in the United States. Now, there are a couple of problems with that. First of all, the North doesn't necessarily want to accept this because they know that if Texas becomes a state, it's going to become a slave state, and they don't want slavery to further expand west. They don't want slavery to go further west, so they don't want to take and allow Texas to become a state in the United States. The other problem is that Congress had also promised Mexican officials and Mexico that they would not continue to expand west, and they would not interfere in the war between Texas and Mexico. So if the United States claims Texas as a state, that is going to directly interfere in that war between Texas and Mexico. So in order to avoid war with Mexico at this immediate time, the United States decides in 1836 not to annex Texas, not to make it part of the United States. However, in the election of 1844, that is all going to change. In 1844, we have President John Tyler, and he is still sticking to his guns and deciding he is not going to annex Texas. He is not going to advocate for the annexation of Texas, because he knows that is going to cause a war and cause huge problems for the United States and a huge disagreement between the United States and Mexico. So he doesn't want to do that. He wants to completely avoid that. However, without really trying, without having any influence on it, without any of Tyler's influence on it, the election of 1844 becomes an election over whether the United States should annex Texas or not, whether they should make it part of the United States. That becomes the major issue of the election, as well as Oregon, tariffs, and the slavery issue, whether the slavery should expand into new states that are taken over, that are west of the South and what is known as the South now. Now, Henry Clay is against annexation. He does not want to go to war with Mexico. James K. Polk is in favor of annexation. He's all for it. He wants to make Texas another part of the United States. And James G. Birney was an abolitionist that ran on an anti-slavery platform. So he doesn't want to see slavery expanded into the West. he's neither for or against annexation, but his main thing is he doesn't want to see slavery expanded into the West. But we really want to focus on Henry Clay and James K. Polk. Those are the candidates. Those were kind of the two most popular candidates, and they were the ones running on platforms that focused on the major issue, which was annexation of Texas. Well, Polk is able to win the election, and when he does, John Tyler takes this as a referendum, or the people basically telling him, hey, we want Texas. We want the United States to take control of Texas. So what he does is he asks Congress in 1845 for a joint resolution to annex Texas, or to take control of it. The resolution passes, and Texas is added to the Union. Now, as soon as this happens, Mexico realizes, and Mexico sees that the United States is doing the one thing that they asked the United States not to do, and that was to interfere in the war between Mexico and Texas. So in response to the United States annexing Texas and taking control of Texas, Mexican ambassadors are going to be pulled out of the United States, and a border dispute between the U.S. and Mexico is going to become much worse. And that is going to eventually lead to the Mexican-American War that we are going to talk about next class. But that is how the Texas Revolution happened, how Texas became an independent country, the Lone Star Republic, and then eventually how Texas became part of the United States, and how that annexation of Texas led to the Mexican-American War. So I needed to tell that story so that we could tell the story of the Mexican-American War, which we will do next class. If you have any questions, guys, please reach out to me during my office hours. Please send me an email. Otherwise, I will catch you guys next class.